fame. Frank Watson here with KaPOOF. Today we have John Lowe with us, and here comes Tom Probasco. Starting on time here, timely manner. Once again, our purpose here is for older folks playing with technology and discussing life, the universe, and the fate of the world and such things as that. And here we go. At the top of my screen is John Lowe, and joining us now is Tom Probasco. We are recording. Good morning, fellas.
Good morning, Tom.
You're a little froggy there, Tom. There we go.
Yeah, I had to get it. I forgot to open the little. There we go. Yeah, my video card is got some. It's an old computer.
It might be your microphone.
Oh, you can't hear me that well?
Yeah, that's the issue. Is you gotta...
Let me let's see. I got let's see. I don't know. I just probably need to be closer.
Well, right there where you're up on it, and
that helps.
Talking straight ahead.
Okay. That's what I just wasn't doing. Okay.
Thank goodness we don't have the paid account, because we might have to go for an hour. That'd be uncomfortable after a while. I guess you can, if you just lean forward when you're talking.
That's it.
Did you happen to get that printout that I sent around?
I got it, but I didn't get a chance to look at it.
Yeah.
And if I do look at it, it's going to probably take me a week to read it because of my eyes.
It's not the large print, but it is. You need to print it. Would need to print it. You both have printers, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it needs printed out.
Yeah, it would need to be, right. Yeah.
Okay, I did not do that, so I'll have to get that.
Because
we have renamed we have gone from POOF to KaPOOF, because John, you like to get started and get right down to it. So why don't you give us...
on this document that I sent out, I try to portray just the way our world is facing our country today. The economy, the politics, the culture. And at the top I have 3 columns. The middle column's a definition of, as I see it, capitalism. And we've talked about that a lot from time to time. And to the left of that is really the right wing, which would be Republican. And I bring out various characteristics of what you'd call the Republican, say, party, traditional Republican Party. And see how, well, let me go over capitalism first, if I may go down. And if you agree or disagree, that's perfectly all right. But capitalism, individual freedom, private property, free market, competition, profit, risk, investment, stockholding and trading, loaning and borrowing for interest or usury. Does that sound like capitalism to you?
Yeah.
I can't think of anything in there that I haven't heard before describing capitalistic.
Okay, keep that in mind. Now let's take the Republican Party, the traditional view of the Republican Party. Strict capitalism, business-oriented, small government, low taxes, trickle down for investment, law and order, the gun lobby, strong national defense, minimize national debt. Does that sound traditional Republican principle? Or do you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. That all sounds pretty traditional to me.
Yeah, they don't mention, a lot of and maybe this makes it traditional. They don't talk a lot about social issues. It's pretty much focused on the economy,
Pretty much business.
the government. Yeah, they don't go. Yeah, that's what.
On the left wing, then, you have the Democrats. They balance capitalism with human need. Full employment if possible, fair wages, human working conditions, larger government to curtail trust. I'll go over that. Larger government to curtail trust abuses and promote welfare programs.
I mean, it even reminds me
Yes.
of Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, it kind of goes back maybe even further than that, but yeah, it does remind me of.
Yeah.
Well, I think really Teddy Roosevelt was the spark, which
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of thinking.
with
You
of
mentioned
course
trusts and yeah,
which the other Roosevelt picked up on after
yeah,
the Depression, right?
and expanded, right?
And the reason why Teddy Roosevelt set up a new party, the Bull Moose, they called it, to counter Taft, who was supposed to carry on what Roosevelt proposed, some of the reforms, but didn't. That's why Roosevelt split with the party and was the Bull Moose party. And that's why Wilson won, because he split the Republicans, really. And so it's something we have to think about on our present day too, doesn't it? Is that so the case?
Ticket splitting, yeah, yeah.
Well, does that sound sort of typical Democrat, traditional?
Yes.
Does to
Recent
me.
decade.
Yeah, does
Now,
to me.
now let's bring us up to date, and we'll see how you go with this. Today's right wing. A fascist and or autocratic leader has emerged whose goal is to elevate his own office of power above the Constitution and its systems of democratic election and government balance of power. He is a strict nationalist and opposed to promoting and defending freedom and democracy globally. Does that sound like Trump? I'm naming his name here. I didn't in my document, but go ahead.
I would say that he promotes nationalism, but I'm not sure he practices it. His relationship with Russia, for instance, was pretty cozy and not necessarily in the interests of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So but go ahead.
That's sort of his nationalistic, though, approach. He doesn't. He's against. Well, I can't say he's against, but he certainly did not encourage NATO. In fact, he was demeaning to NATO, and he doesn't want to invest our. And this is sort of the Republican attitude today. Some of them do not want to invest us into wars across, like Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan. The experiments, which really go back to Bush when they invaded Iraq. If we thought we could convert the Muslims, to the democratic point of view, and I think there was a point to that there was a problem us trying to promote democracy in these lands, which culturally
no history of.
Just didn't work. And I think there's a reaction with that with people like Trump. Well, we don't want to do that anymore. And so
Turned to isolationism.
Yeah, and so nationalism, let that prevail. And we don't want to be that involved again. And there's a point to that. Okay, now we'll say he is supported by a band of radical political opportunists. I'm sorry. A band of radical political opportunists, a number of traditional party members who are timid and mute to challenge the new party alliance. Timid or mute to challenge his new alliance and the people that are really supporting him. A block of populist followers enamored either by his personality or zeal for military power. Those with economic special interests. There are people, well, there may be the farmers, or there are certain people that economically they would favor Trump because he would help them in their, the inflation or whatever it is. There are those people I see that are very supportive of him. And then radical religious evangelicals who are militantly motivated to oppose what they feel is the supreme moral depravity of our nation. These moral objections might be listed as the sexual revolution, going back to the 60s, drugs, looseness of marriage and divorce laws, hyperfeminism, abortion, homosexuality, unnatural sexual identities, too little regulated immigration, abrupt racial and foreign integration, disruption of settled Americans' lifestyle, and the lack of one official language. Now, there's this group of religious evangelicals today that are willing to fight even a war to change the Constitution, if they would, which we call biblical republicanism or theological nationalism, and so forth. With the evangelical movement, and this may be new to you, I don't know, has emerged what could be called Christian nationalism or a biblical republic, or Christian nationalism, or white Christian nationalism. This movement goes back to the leader named R.J. Rushnoony back in 1960, who taught that the United States Constitution was a liberal secular document of the Enlightenment and not supportive of the Christian faith upon which the majority of early settlers or the colonies Instead, he asserted that a new constitution be compiled based on the Bible, the Word of God, where nationhood was prescribed in detail in the Old Testament. Then within that nation, there would be many have trouble reading. Then within that nation, there were many flawed leaders like David, who God blessed and used to his purposes. Such a government built on the word of God would bring rule of law, judgment, and discipline upon the unrighteousness of our country as we see it today. Okay, this is extremism, but it's a possible, it's a motive of some of these biblical nationalists, including the Speaker of the House, who says that's what he is, a biblical Republican. This is what he believes. Now, this is new. Now, in other words, the Constitution is seen as a liberal document, which in a way it was. It followed many of the principles of the Enlightenment, going back to science and education and medicine and all that of the 1700s and all that time, all that followed there. And following the philosophy of John Locke, and who felt that the power should be with the people, and not from above. And also Montesquieu, who taught, was a philosopher, a French philosopher, who taught that there should be a balance of power between the executive and the legislature and the judicial branches, from below up to the top, and then on top, the three balances. Well, that's where we are today in a way, culturally. On the right side, on the right wing, I have not brought about the left wing. There are extremists there too, which we can stop here though if you want to have any questions about my treatment and what you think is possible.
Why don't you go ahead and cover the left wing?
Okay.
Complete picture there.
Now this would be today as I see the Democratic Party. The left is bent first on opposing the threats from fascism, loss of freedom, democracy, and altering the Constitution. Is generally moderately liberal, as described above, but is led by a smaller but vocal group which favors moving toward democratic socialism. Now, there is this group within the Democratic Party which would like to move us, I think Bernie Sanders. This is not Marxist, though, but it is what you call democratic socialism. Having private property and a free market similar to that of Scandinavia. Okay, it's a welfare state, in other words. While the radical evangelicals assert morals as their main motive of grievance, the liberals do with that of the suffering of the needy, the sick, the indigent, marginalized, rejected, and degrees of enslavement. This has been their posture since the Great Depression. As to the moralist issues, liberals have been much more flexible and less crusading when it comes to questions of like the moral issues like seeing the problems of prohibition, the certain blue laws, and bathing suits, say, or strict censorship. Okay, now that's sort of as I see what the Democratic Party is today, or has been. Now the left wing, I'm sorry, my eyes are getting tired too. The left wing may even be more ominous than the right, as for extreme. That does not mean they're the Democratic Party, but the left wing beyond. They do not in any way represent the Democratic Party, but may make their appeal through like human needs, the same as Democrats. One thing that characterizes this extremism is absolute thinking. Now, that's something to keep in mind.
Is what?
Absolute thinking.
Okay.
They see change, but in an absolute sense. They may conclude wildly that America is a racist country. They would say this: America is a racist country. It is true there is much racism in America as I see it, but to brand it totally racist is untrue and not consistent with the progress that we've been making, especially since in the last few decades. You go on another page here. The same could be said about poverty, healthcare, class rigidity, hatred and ridicule of homosexuals, mixing of immigrants and people of exotic differences of looks, religion, and customs. To them, real change must be achieved through the entire culture. Now, this is important to see. They want to change the entire culture itself, the powers that could control it, the powers behind the culture. This is impossible without revolution, not only of the economy, but in all the institutions, structures, value systems, and education. This approach is termed the critical theory. Get that, the critical theory. There's a whole camp of that. An initial aggressive group called, I'm sorry, the initial aggressive groups came in the 60s of this type. They were the Black Panthers, Angela Davis, Malcolm X, and soon after an ex-Nazi named Herbert Marcuse. How different it is from Martin Luther King. Quite a difference. To this many splintered movement, we may ask, revolution to what? So they want to revolt culturally, and they want justice and equality, but with what new culture? They don't really point out what culture. Would it be new neo-Marxism? That didn't work, and it's more broad than just economic. There are the postmodernists, which they don't represent exactly, but that could go along with it, which would say you are what you want to make it, what you will it, and that's right. Whatever you will. That's your point of view of what you call postmodernism. There is no truth. It is what you make it. Postmodernism is that. It is it's the freedom that you make. There's no value system that's up there and say, that's it. Values become what you make it. That's postmodernism. I know that may be new to you, I don't know, but many intellectuals are following that line of thought. It goes back a lot to the culture of since the youth revolutions. Do your thing, do what you want to do. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Follow your bliss. Remember that? Do what you want to do. My way is the right way, whatever it is, it's my way. So a lot of that came through that period too. So this is, I see it, where we are today. Look it up.
Does that go to the very last thing you were talking about there? Is that related in any way to situational ethics? Is that
No, it could be. It depends what you do with situational ethics. If you start off with situation ethics, that's what it would be, because every situation is something. You do what you want to do. There's another side of situation ethics is you follow the rules, but there's a higher rule that brings about exceptions. So do we follow just rules? We have laws and rules and you obey them. By George, you obey the rules. That's why they're there. Yeah. Are there ever any exceptions? Are there exceptions to the rules? Now, that's one kind of situation ethics.
Okay.
It's something we have to think through. And I'm on that point. That's where I am. Otherwise, you're a legalist. Even in law, you have conditions. A judge has to decide whether something is, is the guy out of his mind when he committed this crime? Really? Was he psychotic? Well, there'd be a condition that would change that. we've talked about before, what's the highest value that you achieve? What you're really giving your highest value? To me, it's love God with your whole being and love your neighbor as yourself. I've said this again and again. It's relationship. And then all the other things below that are goods. God did not create anything evil. It's always a certain good that replaces a lower good. I mean, a replacement of a lower good to a higher good. Take money, for instance. Money is a good in itself, but if it becomes a god, it could if it places over human need and so forth, it's an evil. Two goods, one is above the other. So evil really is a misplacement of a good. And what I think that the most subtle of all the evils is that which is closest to the top because it's subtle.
John, have you completed your assessment of the left?
Well, yeah, in a way.
Okay.
Broadly speaking. Go ahead.
Can you in a general way summarize what you have laid out here?
Well, I think we have a really, in a sense, a struggle of power, a struggle of power. One is fascist, and the other, if you take it to its extreme, is something even more than Marx. It's more thorough, and I didn't finish my paragraph. I wasn't finished. It's called wokeism.
Okay.
It's an extreme of a good, which is misplaced.
Okay.
But do it by revolution, not evolution, but revolution. But not only just the economy, which was Marx was teaching, it's a whole culture. I mean, you're going to teach your young entirely different values, whatever. Well, we question what values? Well, it's what you make it. Maybe. That's just one point of view. That's the postmodern point of view. The other is, well, that hasn't been explained. But anyway, that may be some conditioning there. Well, I've done a lot of research in this, and it took me a while to type this up. One of the problems I had was in typing columns, you have a problem. And I forgot how to do that. Maybe you can do that. And it was all encrypted, the first. And I send this to my other Zoom group, and we struggled. I didn't realize it was encrypted, and then I had to redo it.
Oh,
I think that in itself is right on target for our purpose with KaPOOF, which is to address the problems that older people encounter when utilizing newer technologies
That's
and
right.
the rapid change of technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom, did you want to address the general outline of what John has said here?
Well, let me say this first of all, that we have the real possibility of revolution. Really. The right wing these religious people are ready to fight along with the militants and the craziness of the fascists. I think that's the most immediate problem because I think the others very definitely a problem too. And it was perpetuated by Portland, Oregon, there after Floyd George problem. Remember? It was going on looting and continually. But now the bigger problems, I think, because of the power of Trump, but you have a possibility of a revolution.
Okay, let's Tom, you're on.
I'm just curious. You hear that, you hear different terms, civil war, or different, related to potential violence. and maybe we've talked about this, but I don't, anytime you typically have thought, okay, if you think of the Civil War that occurred in the 1800s, I don't understand. So there is a front, there's a dividing line. And what are we just talking about chaos now, where neighbors are attacking neighbors? I'm having a lot of trouble picturing just what the threat of violence would look like. Now, I can understand a small example is at the polls. There's a certain amount of expectation that voting maybe in the general election in November could be there could be some violence or threats of violence to suppress the vote. But otherwise, I don't quite understand what a revolution would look like.
Well, let's put it. There would be a dominance of the right wing where they would take control.
If we had an authoritarian figure.
Yes, well, we have one, and that you just listen to what he says. He'll do what he says.
Yeah, well, and I've read,
and he's going to get. He's going to get.
Believe him. Yeah. So in that case, be locking up. I ought to read things. He talks about very openly. Talks about revenge.
Oh yes,
and
so he'll take it out. And
so that's a specific example. I have been aware of that possibility. And so, I mean, you hear this. I've had for several years now that autocracy is on the march worldwide. So this would just be a joining.
Well, has it not followed him? This autocracy, it did not precede him. It has followed him.
Yeah, no, he didn't. It didn't begin with Donald Trump.
Well, I think it did in the main.
I think there was one of the things that I've read said it does not. It precedes Trump. The ground was laid before he came along, but he's a very useful person with his personality, with what he's willing to do. And that's one of the explanations of why you see people on the right, some of them, what happened to the Dick Lugar Republicans, for instance? They're virtually gone now.
That's right. If they've not only been too timid to speak, I wonder if Lugar would have said a lot more if he'd lived.
Well, that's the thing.
Take Lynn Cheney. Lynn Cheney is an example of a traditional Republican viewpoint.
Yeah, there's an example.
You say it goes back. Yeah, it could probably go back to Newt Gingrich.
Yeah, the Tea Party.
And then following that, the 9/11 and 2008 certainly. And in the last, say, 5 or 6 elections, the Democrats have won almost all of them, with the exception of Trump. But then he lost too, as far as the Congress was concerned. So there was this feeling among the Republicans, well, we're losing out because of welfare, gaining more and more followers. Therefore, we lose. And so you had then also with the 9/11, there was the Tea Party. Yes, you're right that, from Gingrich right on through, there's this feeling of loss, and so we must do something. But what's their problem? The real problem is Marxism. Oh boy, that's what happened. That's the Democratic Party, Marxism. When they speak of socialism, that's what they mean, and they hate it. And I can imagine why. That's so ingrained with them, that hate of the Democratic Party, because that's where it's going. And they'll lie and do anything. I think even traditional Republicans are pretty much this. Well, they distrust the Democratic Party, that's where it's going.
When the people use various labels, socialism, Marxism, without following immediately about a policy that they're opposed to, I kind of get lost. I don't know what they mean. Okay, take for example, a smaller example, cancel culture. Whoa, you just mentioned it, wokeism.
Yeah.
What is that? I mean, I don't know what it's thrown around all the time.
Well, look up
We're against wokeism.
the
What
critical,
is it you're against?
it's the critical theory is what it is. The critical theory, which it encompasses.
I don't think it's well understood. It's frequently
But
cited as that we're opposed to wokeism, critical race theory, critical whatever, but there's not much meat behind what
well, most of the intellectuals of the universities represent the what you'd call the postmodernist point of view. The postmodernist point of view. They are almost Marxist, pretty much so.
Yeah, and so what I think it would help to explain to people is what would change, what in our legal structure, and it gets mixed up in
That's the thing that's being attacked, it's the legal structure. That's what's being attacked. The Constitution.
well,
That will be changing. And that's where the battleground will take place. Now, I'm not saying it has to be a blood revolution, and it may be true that there's enough opposition on an electoral level, but when he's going to, his whole plan is that the electoral college will no longer apply, that it will all be handled by a state legislature as far as electors are concerned. This has already been set up.
yeah, some of it illegally, but
Well, yeah, the whole thing's illegal. That's the thing.
the false electors. But yeah,
January 6th, the demonstration was illegal. All of that was.
Yeah, and I think if it's often said by many, if Trump returns to office, he doesn't intend to leave.
That's right.
And what with that structure? I mean, there would be a lot of unraveling. What most of us see as day-to-day normalcy.
That ship
If all this comes to pass. What's that, Frank?
That ship done sailed. That bus done left the station.
Tell me a little bit more, kind of explain.
Everyday normalcy went out the window when people didn't immediately go to jail under charges of insurrection and terrorism after January 6th.
Right. It's not, it wouldn't seldom as anything go from one way, poof, talk about poof. Yeah, it's that's why there's so much credibility when people, we're about to go poof, aren't we?
Let me just